Today, I'm going to talk about presenting online and give you some tips that I've learnt from many years of presenting at these sorts of events, helping other people present at these events, and just generally learning how to use the tech along the way. So for those of you who are regulars at NewMR, you may or may not remember that I presented on a similar topic back in 2013. And it's one of those presentations that seems to have held up very well in terms of advice over the passage of time. But I'm going to do a little bit of a review of what has changed since 2013, and then go through what are the tips for presenting online that still hold true today. So in some ways, what's changed is a lot, but it's quite easy to categorize into what it is. So like many things in our current world, the main things that's changed is that there are just more and more options for what you're able to do. And you think about the webinar space, there are many more platforms. If you Google best webinar platforms 2019, you'll get, a good list of options. So if you're looking for something, go and have a look at them, see which ones meet your needs at the right price point, and take it from there. Some of the platforms have lighter options that might be a little bit lighter on the budget, sometimes a bit lighter on features. But there are also other ways that you can present online. If you think of things like Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, you can now present on live through your social media platforms to your current followers. So that can be another thing to think about. There's also lots more tools. And I don't necessarily mean webinar tools, but there are things like apps that give you teleprompters. So you're starting to have, in kind of the low cost space, some of the tools that professionals used to use that you can bring into your kit when you're thinking about presenting. If you think about things like Canva, you've now got at your fingertips some tools that can help you make really high quality graphics, but they're easy to use and you don't necessarily have to be a designer. So there's lots of apps and software now that can really give you some of the tools that not that long ago were limited to professionals. You had to have, a recording studio to have access to some of them, but now they're available to all of us and they're often free or relatively low cost. So have a look around, talk to other people who present online and see what sorts of things they offer and how you can incorporate them. But if we think about presenting online and compare it to face-to-face, which is probably still most people's first experience of presenting, how does presenting online face-to-face and face-to-face differ? Well, there are some things that are still very much the same. There are some things that are a bit different, and there are some things that are very different. So unfortunately for everybody, the thing that's not changed is you still need to plan, you still need to prepare, and you still need to practice. And in many ways, those things become more important when you're presenting online, and particularly when you're new to presenting online. Obviously, there is more to practice. There is more that can go wrong. So you really need to have your planning, your preparation, and your practice well organized. So what are the basics? You do need a good internet connection if you're presenting live. Don't try and do it without a good internet connection. It just won't work. Headset and mic. Now, we always recommend people present with a headset and mic. Sometimes people don't, and it can be fine, but sometimes it can be challenging. But the good news is you do not need an expensive headset and mic. A relatively reasonably priced option that can pick up at your local office supply store will do the job. So we would always recommend that you get yourself one of those. Another non-negotiable is you really do need to be in a quiet space. Do not try and do these things in an open and plan office, in a coffee shop, in the airport. You need to be somewhere quiet, otherwise you just don't get the sound quality. And again, practice. Now there's two elements to practicing when you're talking about presenting online. there's the content. So what you're planning to present, make sure you've got that organized. But then there's also the technical components. So practice, become familiar with the features of the software platforms that you're using. The more you use them, they'll start to become second nature. So when something goes wrong or you're a bit nervous, that action is just natural and it just happens. So make sure you practice both the content, but also become really familiar with the software that you're using. So we talk about audience 1.0. If you've presented to a live audience, that's what we call audience 1.0. They're the people sitting in front of you. You can see their faces, you can see their reactions. That is not the audience that you experience in an online environment. There's two elements to audience 2.0 that you need to think about. One is, how does the audience itself differ? And the other component is how you experience the audience becomes quite different. So audience 2.0 is not any one thing. The people who are listening into this presentation today, some of them will be at home in an office, some people will be at work in an office, some people are going to be in open plan spaces. There will be people next to them working, people next to them on the phone, people next to them chatting, somebody doing a collaborative task. There'll be a whole lot of stuff happening around them. Someone will be in a coffee shop, someone will be tuning in from their holiday. People are in different spaces. So they are not necessarily able to pay 100% attention to you, and they may not even want to. And then think about your interaction with the audience. This is what presenting in a webinar can feel like, particularly the very first time or the early times that you do it. You feel like you're talking into a black hole. You're not getting any feedback from the audience. You might even be wondering whether the audience is even hearing what you're saying. So you will miss the audience feedback. You may even be surprised by how much you miss that feedback. When you present live, the audience engage with you. They smile. There's often somebody in the front row who nods at what you say, and you actually draw a lot of comfort from that, and good positive feedback starts to give you more confidence. In the same way, lack of positive feedback can make you feel more nervous. So you really need to learn how to cope without feedback. And also remember that in face-to-face presentations, you often have the opportunity to adjust your delivery based on that feedback. So positive feedback can make you feel better. You might even try something a bit more adventurous if things are going well. If you start getting negative feedback, and that can be, oh, I don't think they understand what I'm saying. So you can perhaps rephrase something, go through it again, go through things more slowly. Similarly, if you're losing people's attention, you can try something to bring them back. Perhaps you are moving too slowly. Maybe you're spending too much time on the simple things. You can adjust and move on. And you really need to realize that you won't be getting that feedback and learn other ways of presenting without it. So when you're presenting and you're looking into that black hole, these are some of the things that are going through your head. You know, you don't know if people are listening. You don't even know if it's working. Can people hear you? Is it boring? What slide are they up to? You don't even know if they're seeing the same thing that you're talking about. Are they understanding you? Are you speaking too quickly? Are you speaking too slowly? Did they get your joke? Are you funny? And the big one is, if you've got builds in your presentation, you sometimes do not know if they're seeing your builds. Are they seeing them at the time you think you're seeing them? So you can have a lot of these thoughts running through your head. It can be really distracting. It can make you a bit more nervous, and it can take you away from your main task, which is presenting those results or that content to your current audience. So these thoughts can be, really scary. So you need to get used to presenting online. And there are some strategies you can put in place to help calm and dull some of these voices so you're not worried about them. So what are some strategies? Really simple one is smile. I'm sure people remember that saying from years ago when we talked on phones more, smile, people can hear it in your voice. And it is true. It does come through. If you're happy, people can hear that in your voice. The other thing to think about is energy levels. It's very easy when you're presenting alone and you've not got an audience for your energy to drop. A lot of times people won't even realize that their energy is dropping. So you need to try and maintain that energy. Put a sign up on the wall, to remind yourself to maintain that energy level. Smile. They're all useful things to keep sounding great when you're presenting online. There are some things that you can work into your presentation. We sometimes recommend to people the idea of a BYO audience. You may not want to have lots of people watching you present, but it can be really terrific to have one colleague with you in the room. You can present to them. That helps keep your energy up. If you've got a colleague in the room with you too, they can be logged in to another terminal. So all those thoughts in your head of like, are my slides broadcasting? Where are we up to? That second computer can just calm any worries you have about that, because you actually know what's happening on a second computer. You may not always be able to have a colleague present to something else. It might be your cat, it might be your dog, it could be a plant. Just put a sign up on the wall that says, smile, keep your energy up, present to that. Having something to focus on really helps you in that online presentation. And here are some other tips. Now remember, this is your production. You are choosing what you broadcast. Now that could be something like today, it could be a video of you, it could be a podcast, but you're in charge of that production and you choose which window of what you're doing is broadcast to the world. That doesn't mean you don't necessarily have some other things going on in the background. For example, behind the scenes, you can have a whole lot of stuff that helps you be a really professional presenter. Say you could have notes. You can have signs up on the wall reminding you what to do. If you've written a script, you could use something like a teleprompter app or the notes page of PowerPoint. There are plenty of tools that you can be using to look great. You can have that BYO audience we're talking about. You can have the trusted colleague who's reminding you to do things, but nobody else needs to see what needs to happen to make you look good. Unlike when you go and present live at a conference or a seminar, you can't have any of that backup without people seeing it. But you can really, if you take the time and effort, have a lot of things working behind the scenes to make you look fantastic. So think about and try and take advantage of the opportunity to do that. You know what will work for you, and you can try different things. And over time, as you become more confident, you might find you no longer need some of those things. So recordings, we've been focusing a lot on presenting live, but we can record what we're doing live. For example, this is being recorded right now and will be available to people to listen to down the track. But you might decide that presenting live is not for you. You're a recordings person. That can be great if you've got technical challenges, internet's not good, it's really hard for me to find a quiet space in the daytime at work, but I can manage to make that happen out of hours. Also gives you options if you're a nervous presenter of doing multiple takes. If you'd like to, craft a message more, you can splice things together. So you're really only limited by kind of your technical expertise or the technical expertise that you have access to. And certainly you can play around with different options of releasing shorter recordings, and things like that can be hosted on websites, in your social media. So think about recordings if perhaps presenting live is not for you, but also use them to augment your live events. Many, many more people will probably listen to this presentation over its life as an after the event play again type option than are listening to this right now. It's also a terrific reference, and you can even use it in your content marketing if you want to grab snippets out of it. So there are lots of options with recordings. They also can be great as a way of pitching yourself as a speaker for events. So maybe you've not presented at a conference before, you're finding it hard to get synopses accepted. Share a recording of you. If people can see that you're a good presenter, or even what your style's like. Are you a good fit for the conference? That's a really good way of putting yourself forward for things. And even short recordings can be a great way of starting to build your confidence over time. So let's think about your presentation. What do you need to do? Always respect the medium. Think about what you are presenting and who you're presenting it to. So when you're presenting live, time delays are just a fact of life. So try to avoid things like builds, animation, video. Scripts that rely on really tight timing are tricky to work live like we're presenting today. Almost nobody in this audience will be hearing me at exactly the same point in time. So if you really do need to be using some of the things like builds, tightly scripted content, perhaps a recording is better for what you're trying to achieve at that current point in time. Try and personalize your content. That can be a number of things. It could be just including your branding, could be including photos of yourself, could be lots of other things. If there's multiple people talking, make sure you're identifying people by name. Steve, what do you think? It's Sue here. I'm now saying this. So try and work those in. Think about the audio. Now, for some people, audio only can be a great option. We all love a lot of podcasts and see how much they can achieve with the audio channel only. And certainly there are plenty of people who will listen to the audio of a podcast that's got visuals and will only look at the screen when they think, oh, I do need to see that chart. So focus on the audio. It's so important. And challenge yourself to think about, do I need the visuals? We've had some great NewMR webinars in the past where somebody has just used their voice, and it can be so powerful for the right content. So think about what works for you. Okay, some final practical tips. So when you're practicing, make sure you use the software and the hardware that you'll be using on the day. Whilst sometimes practicing with other tools can be useful, you really need to be familiar with what you're using on the day, and make sure you present from the location. Practice from the location you'll be presenting on, because that will reveal whether your internet connection's good enough and any other issues. So some final ideas: be creative. You're limited only by what you can think about doing. Think about radio, the power of voice. Listen to radio presenters that you like and think about some of the devices they use to be engaging in the voice medium. You can think about using more than one presenter. That can be a great way to keep the presentation engaging. It's also a good way of introducing new speakers and creating some lively dialogue around topics. There are other things you can use like polls and other interactive tools that can keep the audience engaged. Tech stuff. If you're nervous about tech, get some IT support. That could be outsourced or in-house. If you're presenting external media, make sure you know that those file formats are going to work. Live demos, they can be great, but there can also be challenges. So make sure you've got some backups there. If you're planning to demo software live, have some screenshots that you can show should things not work as planned. Have some emergency contacts. If you're presenting with other people, the internet goes down, you need to have a phone number. You can't rely on Skype or email to contact them. And always have a plan B. So 4 key takeaways: make sure you prepare and practice. Have somebody with you if that helps. Remember, voice can be more important than visuals. And sometimes it will go wrong. No matter how much you plan, practice, prepare, no matter how good your technology is, every now and again, something will go wrong and you'll just need to go with it. But if you've got a plan B, you'll be fine. So thanks very much for listening in today, and I look forward to any questions you might have.
Hi, Sue. We need to move along quite quickly, but we have got questions. So let's take as many of them as we can. So what constitutes a good connection? Is there a download speed that is a minimum, or is it something that is platform dependent?
Probably a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. I think it's good enough to practice by ear. So get somebody on the line, do a test. If you can hear each other clearly, that's probably going to be good enough. When we're running events like today, we will always get everybody to log on, sort of 25, 30 minutes early. And that way we've got chatting time beforehand and we can hear if things not working. Everybody who's presenting at the Festival of NewMR has done a rehearsal. So we've sort of sorted out who might have not a great internet connection at work and, put some plans in place for that. But I think to the ear is good, and you can't always rely on the fact that you can have a good internet connection one morning, but that doesn't mean it's great the next evening. So you've really got to be kind of making sure you're logging in early enough and practicing.
So another question here. So in a live presentation, sometimes people will ask questions during the session to break the session up, to encourage conversation. Any tips on how we would do that online?
I think it's really probably a matter of just planning that beforehand, because it's certainly technically possible. You probably, if you're the presenter, need a helper with you to help you, and perhaps in the way Ray's come on with the Q&A now, we could plan perhaps when we're going to take breaks or when somebody's going to come online. So I think it's really probably about thinking it through, having a process in place, and it can be quite simple. You've then got a plan for what happens if you don't get questions as well. So that's where the two presenter model is probably a really easy way to start doing that.
We have another question here. So any additional suggestions for increasing either active or passive audience engagement?
I mean, I think that really depends on your topic, your audience. I mean, you can certainly pull in things like social media, have people commenting or acting there. It certainly is a challenging thing to get people engaged, and, well, not so much engaged, but actually taking action. We even notice around different parts of the world, we will get more questions in, some regions than we will in others. People tend to sometimes take a little time to warm up asking questions in some parts of the world. So you can also, have some of perhaps your trusted colleagues, talk to them beforehand and say, I'm really trying to encourage participation in this. Could you please ask me a question? Because sometimes you just need somebody to start the ball rolling.
And we've got two more, but we really need super short answers. You mentioned a design package earlier. What was that?
Canva, C-A-N-V-A.
Super. And do you think it's better to have a more scripted approach than in a face-to-face presentation?
I think it probably depends on the individual, and certainly the process of putting a script together can actually help you become a more natural presenter. I think ideally you'd probably want to start with a script and then have become so comfortable with the material, you've almost thrown the script away and moved into a more natural approach. But obviously that takes, a certain amount of time to have reached that process. But I think, good preparation for both face-to-face and online presentations will make you a better presenter. And some of those presenters that you think are fantastic, natural, relaxed presenters who look like they're just presenting off the cuff, they have practiced. That's how they've got that smooth, casual look happening.
And one quick final on that from behind the technical side, where I know quite often if people are scripted, if you can't hear somebody turning the page, then they never sound scripted when it comes over a webinar. People are worried that they're over scripted. It doesn't seem to happen.
Okay, well, thanks, Ray, for coming online to do the Q&A for me.